Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief. One of the categories of firms that has done the best so far in the AI boom is, of course, the consultants. Revenue for consulting-related engagements is way up for all of the biggies like Accenture and McKinsey. In fact, AI is driving a huge portion of their new business. And yet at the same time, it feels very, very clear that while there is a massive short-term opportunity for consulting, right, tons and tons of enterprises and businesses that need help navigating this transformation, it is also equally clear that AI represents a fairly existential threat to their models as such. To the extent you view consulting as experts with specialized knowledge, being smart about how to gather information, process that information, and turn that into advice, a lot of that certainly sounds like things that AI and LLMs are very good at, right? In fact, some of my episodes about the AI disruption of consulting companies have been my most popular of all time. And what's more, consultants aren't just facing challenges from LLMs directly. To some extent, one of the big patterns that we're observing is that every technology provider is also becoming a services company at the same time. This is the Palantirification of everything. And according to the latest from the information, OpenAI is among the companies who are walking down that road. Over the weekend, the information published this piece, OpenAI takes a page from Palantir, doubles down on consulting services. They write, OpenAI is adding staff and resources for a consulting-like service, in which its engineers guide customers through a process known as fine-tuning. Now, you guys are a little bit more sophisticated, so I'm sure you know what fine-tuning is, but basically it's a process of modifying a model based on a particular set of data, like the set of data that you have around a particular enterprise or company. The information continues. To get the consulting help, OpenAI is typically requiring customers to spend at least $10 million. OpenAI is telling potential customers that it will refine its models such as GPT-4o using their proprietary corporate data so that the model can solve problems specific to their needs. These engineers also develop applications powered by customized models such as chatbots akin to ChatGPT, according to OpenAI executives and customers of the service. Now, the information says that this move puts OpenAI into quasi-competition with software firms like Palantir, consulting firms like Accenture, and they also point out that from the very little that we know, this appears to be part of how ex-OpenAI CTO Mira Murati's startup, which of course raised a $2 billion seed round on a $10 billion valuation, looks to stand out and compete. Again, from the information, Thinking Machines Lab plans to use reinforcement learning, a common AI development technique that rewards an AI model for accomplishing certain goals and penalizes it for other behaviors. TML plans to customize models on specific business metrics its customers track, aka KPIs, which typically relate to revenue or profit growth. TML may be banking on the idea that customers of AI may be willing to pay a premium for models customized for their industry. Now, going back to the OpenAI version, the company has specifically been hiring for a role known as forward-deployed engineers. They say that OpenAI formed an FTE team earlier this year and hired around a dozen people for it, including several who work for Palantir. Now, forward-deployed engineer is perhaps the hottest job title in Silicon Valley right now. And to understand what it is, go back and check out a post from the Palantir blog back from November 2020 called A Day in the Life of a Palantir Forward-Deployed Software Engineer. It followed a day in the life of Brian, who was at that time focused on delivering data integration solutions to a US Department of Defense customer. Brian said, a forward-deployed software engineer is a software engineer who embeds directly with our customers to configure Palantir's existing software platforms to solve their toughest problems. While a traditional software engineer or dev focuses on creating a single capability that can be used for many customers, forward-deployed engineers focus on enabling many capabilities for a single customer. We are deployed across many industries and problem domains, so the breadth of projects we tackle is large and always evolving. When asked, is an FTE similar to a consultant, Brian said, no, not really. I think one of the things that differentiates us from consultants is how technically creative we can be while also delivering solutions quickly. In the hands of a forward-deployed engineer, Palantir's products are ready-built playgrounds that empower us to be flexible and efficient in how we solve problems. Unlike consultants, we can pull most of the pieces together out of the box, meaning we don't need to reinvent the wheel for each customer and spend years creating a patchwork solution. Instead, we can focus on composing the right architecture of features or whipping up a new secret sauce to supercharge users. This way, I'm always creating software that makes my customers more uniquely able to do their jobs. Now, as much as Brian and Palantir said that forward-deployed engineers are not like consultants, they are absolutely undeniably a new category of consultant. And the category and what makes it interesting is that they are specifically focused on a particular software platform and fast forwarding and making it work inside a company at a more rapid clip. And so going back to OpenAI once again, the idea is basically that there are some advanced technical things that you can do with these models that might make them more performant for a variety of enterprise use cases that, frankly, most enterprises just aren't going to have the technical capabilities to do, or at least do well. And so by embedding engineers directly inside their biggest customers, they make their solutions more usable. Now, this is a major trend right now across the AI industry. When Palantir first started doing this, there was skepticism from Silicon Valley, who has a near visceral counter-reaction to anything that hints of services and not software margins. And there was even skepticism in the public market. However, now as Palantir is trading as one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive major stock in the market, things have shifted dramatically. What looked like smaller margins than pure play software companies has instead turned into a significant advantage and a deep entrenchment that owns the customer relationship. This trend has become prevalent enough that at the beginning of June, Andreessen Horowitz dropped a research post called Trading Margin for Moat, why the forward deployed engineer is the hottest job in startups. The post reads, "For the better part of the last decade, it's been broadly assumed that product-led growth, or PLG, is superior to implementation-heavy enterprise software. The allure is obvious. PLG promises greater scalability and higher margins. The obsession has been driven by success stories like Atlassian, Slack, Figma, Notion, and Dropbox, and more recently ChatGPT and Cursor. All of these products offer simple, single-player modes, are easy to adopt without needing a sales call, and can be purchased directly with a credit card. No lengthy scoping or enterprise contracts required. During platform shifts, however, companies have room to experiment and build more intricate products that don't follow the standardized formula. Salesforce, ServiceNow, and Workday did this during the transition from on-premise to cloud platforms. Each of these companies sells an enterprise platform requiring significant implementation, services, and support, which is the antithesis of bottoms-up PLG. However, in nailing complex implementations, these companies achieve dominance with impressive market capitalizations. Their combined value dwarfs that of the top PLG companies, and it's not even close." He continues later on, "Category-defining companies like Salesforce and ServiceNow became indispensable largely because of their ability to integrate with a company's internal systems and context. The customization effort initially results in lower gross margins and higher burn rates. At IPO, for example, ServiceNow's gross margin was 63.2% and Workday's was 54.1%, far below the ideal around 80% for software. Even Salesforce, generally considered the gold standard, reportedly burned over $52 million to generate $22 million in revenue before developing its partner ecosystem. These complex businesses are easiest to build early in a platform shift, when workflows are still taking shape and the payoff for replacing an entire system of record is highest. The AI platform shift is different from, and in some ways more exciting than, the previous transitions to cloud or mobile, though, because the implementation work required to make agentic experiences can itself be streamlined and automated by AI. Historical integration work might require outreach and collaboration with partners, mapping data fields, navigating data transfer between different coding languages, and understanding various internal guidelines. This is the kind of work that can now be done more efficiently and in some cases entirely with AI. Once those workflows and behaviors are established, these companies possess moats that allow them to increase prices and build implementation ecosystems." Now he goes on with a bunch of different observations and best practices, but the point is, this is an instantiation of something that is absolutely a trend that everyone is seeing, which is that all of the big players have some version of this approach to FDEs and actually building on these new platforms for the enterprise clients. But what does this mean in terms of OpenAI strategy? The line that I don't totally agree with is the idea that it puts OpenAI into quasi-competition with Palantir and Accenture. Although that is nominally true, it's pretty clear to me, as a fairly close observer, that OpenAI, one, is going to do whatever it takes to continue to grow adoption of their tools, and two, has a strong sense that owning the customer relationship is really going to matter. All the indications we see from OpenAI with things like building their own agents indicates that they are not comfortable betting exclusively on model superiority and want to actually own the relationship with the end customer. Now, when it comes to consumers in ChatGPT, they have that in spades. When it comes to the enterprise, that's still more up for grabs, even though they are in the lead. But at the same time, it's very clear to me that OpenAI is not doing this all on their own. For example, over the last couple of months, they have announced a number of partnerships with dev shops and implementation labs like Tribe AI. In May, they announced the Tribe partnership, and just a week ago, they announced a similar relationship with Fractional. The idea is pretty simple. OpenAI brings the models, Fractional or Tribe or other partners bring, as Chris Taylor, the CEO of Fractional, put it, the end-to-end support from idea to production. And what's more, OpenAI isn't just partnering with the up-and-comers. They have relationships like this to some extent with basically all of the big GSIs or systems integrators, including, for example, this one with PwC. So when it comes to OpenAI, I see this more as them doing everything it takes and a validation of forward deployed engineers as a key part of the playbook than as them having some radical new strategy. But it still does have the impact of putting new pressure on the existing consulting partners. And we're starting to see that manifest. Bloomberg recently reported that PwC's AI head had said that the firm had started to cut prices because tech was saving their staff time. Said Chief AI Officer Dan Priest in an interview with Bloomberg, clients would hear us talking about using AI and say, we want our fair share of those efficiencies. We certainly, as appropriate, give our clients the pricing benefit of the efficiencies we're achieving. In other words, hold aside the details, there is downward price pressure that AI is creating for these companies that are selling AI services. Again, to bring our own personal examples of this, one may still absolutely prefer the comprehensiveness and human touch that you get working with a PwC or an Accenture or McKinsey or whomever. But what we do with our agent readiness audit, interviewing dozens or hundreds or even thousands of people over the course of a couple of days, and turning that all into actionable insight around which agent use cases are best suited for your firm based on the hundreds of hours of interviews that we just got, would have been completely impossible in the pre-AI era. And even the closest approximation of it would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and taken months. We're offering it for less than a tenth of that in days. And if we're taking out the discovery portion of what consultants have historically done, other companies are nibbling at all the other parts as well. Now, as an aside, by the way, in our experience, as much as they have to charge for discovery work, it's not the work that consultants want to do. Consultants and professional services firms want to do the high-value stuff that actually produces results that gets them rehired, not just the long, laborious discovery. And so it's actually a good fit and a win-win for everyone. But the point is, AI is absolutely coming for a lot of what is on the books as revenue right now. The din of conversation talking about the disruption to consulting is doing nothing but getting louder. Last week, The Economist ran a piece called Who Needs Accenture in the Age of AI? They write, between the start of 2015 and the end of 2024, Accenture, which split off from its accounting sibling in 2000 and went public a year later, generated a total return of around 370%. Handily outdoing not just the S&P 500 index, but also Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. As America's stock market climbed to an all-time high in February, the firm was worth $250 billion, more than either investment bank. Since then, however, investors have wiped out some $60 billion from its market value. They pointed out that new bookings for both one-off consulting projects and managed services were down, and that while some of it was a temporary setback, think trade war, real war, and all the other macro problems, as The Economist puts it, the firm's problems run deeper. Having made a fortune telling others how to adapt to newfangled tech, it now faces the selfsame predicament in the age of general artificial intelligence. As semi-autonomous Gen AI agents sweep the world, who needs consultants? Now, obviously, I think that there is a lot of room for evolution and adaptation. But like in almost every industry, the reality is that consulting and professional services will not look the same in a year or certainly 5 or 10 years as it does now. The companies that are able to nimbly adapt to that and change could build incredible, enduring legacies. But they're going to have to do it with people coming in from all sides. Software companies, neo-consulting companies, product companies. Everyone, it seems, is now in the business of technology and services all at once, and that could be a challenge. For now, very interesting to see that OpenAI is moving into this forward-deployed engineer space, and we will continue to keep an eye on the trend. Thanks as always for listening or watching. Until next time, peace.